satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Satellite Haiku, welcome. I'm MiLo.
I'm Shawn. What's going on?
Craziness, man. I know we don't want to be like a completely political show. Obviously, we talk about family stuff and art and but I do.
There's a lot of people talking politics, but it's crazy times we live in.
Yeah, no, I do want to talk about the State of the Union address.
I didn't watch any of it.
Right.
I didn't watch a single second of it, and I didn't even watch any. I haven't even watched any coverage of it because I just feel like, what is the point? That nothing that guy said, like most of what that guy says is a lie or just bluster.
Well,
so like, why do I want to listen to just lies and bluster for however long he goes?
And truth be told, what was funny for me is my wife was working late at the lab, and so I'm at home with my mother-in-law, and we're having dinner and in the kitchen, and I said, "Is it okay if I put it on? Do you want me to find like a Spanish translation or like a kind of like a side channel where they can?" She said, no, I want to, I can just hear the sound of his voice and I don't need to hear it in English. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I just want to be sort of present. Yeah. And our point was like, some people like, it's not adding any value to your life and you're not learning anything. But these are historic times and it kind of felt like going to like watch Nero play the violin while Rome burns, you know, it felt like there was a little bit of that kind of a take to it from my perspective. And so I gotta say the things that struck me were, I thought he was going to be way more like senile old man. And he was more like Liberace. Like I think my guess is, because I've seen him really sleepy.
This is the second time in my life a second time in the last 2 days that Liberace has come up in my world, which is weird in itself. But anyway, it's a weird synchronicity.
And
but
I feel like it's very unfair to Liberace. Like I wasn't a fan of Liberace. My parents, we sort of made fun of his flamboyance and all the sequence. And my mom. We
don't have to go down the Liberace road.
That's actually kind of a cute thing because my mom was a church organist.
Yeah.
And so I think she felt, and she really, like, she took me to a lot of like excellent piano concertos and things. Yeah. And I think like the Liberace sort of the style, his presentation offended her in some way. I see. As a piano player. Like,
the context that came up yesterday was just that we were talking about, like, I was out with a friend. It's beer week in San Francisco. So I was out drinking beers. Nice. Which my voice is a little rough today. I'm probably going to go out again tonight just because
Russian River. Russian River?
It wasn't Russian River last night. I had Pliny last week. There was a bar that did a preview of Pliny for a beer week. They always do it. They crack a keg of Pliny the Younger, which is rare to find here. But anyway, Russian River. So we were talking about high school, and he went to a Catholic high school. You and I went to a churchy high school, and we were talking about there were no out gay people in our friend groups or any in high school, right? And I was saying, like, remember, even Boy George, like we just refused to see the obvious fact that he was gay. You know what I mean? And I remember like Liberace would go on like Merv Griffin in that era, and Merv would ask him like, "Hey, like, so no woman in your life, huh? No lady in your life, huh?" And I just haven't found the right woman. Right. And it's just like, it blows my mind that it was such a closeted world that even Liberace, even Boy George, George Michael, the jockiest, most homophobic guys in our high school were really into Wham.
Yeah. No, it's
and
true.
Had no clue that George Michael was gay. Right. Like, you just like when you look at George Michael or Boy George, as flamboyant as Boy George was, or Liberace, and it's so funny to me looking back, like how deep our refusal was as a culture to recognize that those dudes, like, they're the gayest guys in almost like the last century.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah,
and they were begging the world to notice that they were gay, and we just wouldn't do it.
It's actually a very interesting topic. I mean, I went to NYU. I used to lift weights, and there was like the group of jocks that were like football players, and then there was the gay guys. And I didn't have anything in common with the football players, so I would always hang out with the gay guys.
Yeah.
And so one day I said to one of the guys that was like spotting me, I was like, how come nobody ever like hits on me? Because they hit on each other and they're like flirting and stuff, and no one ever hits on me. And the guy goes, honey, because you so straight, you reek of straightness. And I never really, I thought about it. I was like, I actually am not a particularly masculine person, but I'm very, very interested in women. Like, I'm not like bisexual in any way. Like, it's not like I'm afraid. Anyway, so what's funny about it is, if you think back in our little, like, okay, first I want to say Fried Green Tomatoes. Have you seen this film or read this book?
Yeah.
And you know how it's about...
I have definitely seen the film. I don't think I read the book, but I may have.
And basically just that the two main female characters are a gay couple, lesbian couple, who live in this small town. Maybe it's Kentucky, like they're horse lesbians or something.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of knows, and they just protect them. You know, the sheriff, and it's like you don't... You know, it's like it was a dangerous thing to be out in 1957 or something. You know, my new secret aunt, her non-biological father who raised her in Denver, was gay, and most likely she thinks his partner was his coworker who was black. Yeah. So think of like 1952. You're gay in Denver, and you're dating your lover is black.
Sure. Yeah.
That's probably pretty dangerous. And you
absolutely,
know,
So, I mean, no, I get why you would be not out in Bernathen, where we grew up, in our high school. That's one thing. I get why, you know, maybe only amongst your most trusted friends might even know. But I don't, like, I remember one student at the very end of high school, kind of like it dawning on me that he was gay. One. And I don't know, did you have more in high? Were there a bunch of people in high school that you were like, that person was definitely gay? Like in college for sure, but like in high school? And then again, I'm going to go back to George Michael and Boy George and Liberace. And I'm just going to say, like, there was no risk in kind of deciding you didn't like those people because they were gay. Like you could, as our culture, like being like, oh, homophobic would have been totally accepted, right? So you could have, anybody could have been like, oh, that person's gay, I don't like them. Or like, I like them, like, you know, other than that they're gay. Like it never came up that Boy George was gay. Yeah. It was never acknowledged. Like nobody, like we were all in this performance, this mass performance, deciding that we couldn't, you know, not seeing it. So that's the thing I'm kind of pointing to. Not the homophobia and the fear and all, like all that, of course, like that existed. Like,
and I do think it's pretty fascinating. I heard in an interview, like I was up on the roof, you know, banging nails on like WMMR, like classic rock, or I don't know. And he was on this interview, maybe in London, and he said, oh no, I'm not gay. I just like to wear women's clothes. And if Mick Jagger was in my bed, I wouldn't kick him out. That was like the thing people used to say, like, if Mick I'm not gay, but if Mick Jagger was in my bed, I wouldn't kick him out. And I remember anyway, so one interesting thing about our town was we did my cousin's aunts. They weren't my aunts, but my cousin's aunts. There were several of them, 3 or 4 of them, who married gay men. And then gay men, you know, moved into another house on the property and had lovers, and everyone knew, like they would go together.
I remember some of those guys. Yeah.
But we just sort of accepted them like fried green tomatoes. It wasn't like anyone that I know of did anything scary or dangerous to them.
At the same time, they were like sort of weird outliers, right? Like it was like they were eccentric. Like
they were very wealthy.
The best sort of the most charitable, our most charitable sort of take on those guys back then was just that they were eccentric,
right? And I think
strange and like doing their thing, because they were eccentric in like 5 other ways as well, not just the fact that they were gay. Like the fact that they were gay was part of their whole persona of being kind of eccentric in our community.
Yeah. No, it's a really fascinating. It was a fascinating thing because you know. Well, anyway, so I do think.
So you want to weave it back to Trump and Liberace?
Let's weave it back. Yeah. So the Liberace movie. So my point is, like, I dishing on Liberace like because I equated him with Trump. My
Sure.
point was that Trump, I think they fed him a cocktail. Here's what I think is some Adderall, a little bit of Coke, maybe like part of a benzo, just to kind of get him compressed into so he could stay alert. Because it was the longest State of the Union speech ever.
Really?
And the second longest was his before in the last term. And he turned it into like a variety show. It was, he'd be like, now we're so tired of winning and let's invite out it was sort remember like This Is Your Life on Sesame Street? He's like the men's hockey team, the Olympic team that won, so, come on out. And then he like introduces them. He gave away like Purple Hearts. He had Erica Kirk, like it was really, really like variety show-esque.
Like a vaudeville act.
And he was the carnival barker. At one point, he often complains about his microphones being poor quality. Mm-hmm. At one point, they just let him, he was shouting, winning. And his mic was just clipping like crazy. Like it was like, hitting the headroom was and they just let it run. They were like, that's part of the shtick. It means that he's, powerful. He's kicking the mic's ass. But what I was sort of surprised.
That was probably just an incompetent sound guy, like the same guy who booked Four Seasons Length,
Yeah.
So do you think they have competent people around to manage the sound?
Well, no, but I do know
you're
that
doing 4D chess on the sound guy.
Yeah, it's true. But I'm thinking, I just imagine Susie Wiles like over in the corner, and the sound guy's looking at her because he's screaming into the mic, and he's got like he can't move the mic away. And like a singer would be like, move the mic away when they scream.
Yeah.
Anyway, so maybe Susie Wiles is like, just let it roll. Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, we don't, you can't compress, you can't limit that,
Yeah.
But, okay. So my point was, weaving it back to Trump and Liberace, he was very, very much a showman.
Yeah.
It was all about just constantly, everything is awesome. Yeah. You're getting so rich. All my ideas are amazing. My platforms, my policies are awesome and great. Mm-hmm. And what someone said, like Professor Galloway said, like this was a giant present wrapped like a bow for congressional Democrats and senators that are running, because he didn't address the high cost of housing, healthcare.
It would be, except like everybody already knows what Trump's going to do when he goes up there. So like, who cares? You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
You could play it endlessly, and we've seen it 2 million times already. That's the other reason I didn't watch it. It's like, we've seen him for 10 years now, like doing the same thing for 10 years, like with slightly less coherence now than he had 10 years ago. And, so like, there's nothing in it that will help anybody, Democrats or, none of those, everybody's already made their decision about Trump, like about 8 years ago. Right. So, I mean, I remember going through, when Trump was first elected, it was right around the time that my son was about to go into kindergarten.
Oh, well.
Excuse me. Still have a cold. And we were touring schools to decide to where to take him, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the schools we went through, one of the first schools, had a big poster of U.S. presidents on the wall, right? And it had all the presidents, boom, 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 little portraits, right? And it ended with Obama. And and I remember looking at that poster going, oh my God, every future iteration of that poster is going to have this dumb shit stain of a guy on it, Donald Trump. Like at that time, Donald Trump was just like The Apprentice, like just the annoying, like this guy who I'm already so annoyed by. I've never, like I didn't watch The Apprentice. I just can't stand him as a persona, a blowhard that he is, right? And I'm like, for the rest of U.S. history, that guy is going to be on every future iteration of this poster. And it just seemed to make a joke out of the whole poster. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, there are bad presidents on that poster for sure. James Buchanan and Andrew Johnson being a couple of the worst ones. Maybe Andrew Johnson is our worst president, whatever. But oh my God, it's just like there was sort of a, like, this guy does not belong. Like I have to, every generation from every future iteration. It offended me so much that every future iteration of the list of presidents will have that guy's face or name on it. And it just offends me. I don't know. He's just such a shit stain on the world. And so I don't know, like I don't know. I can't get past that enough to like imagine watching the State of the Union.
Yeah. And I don't blame you at all. And I was sort of doing it out of curiosity because I think a lot of us, the super left.
But how do you still have curiosity after 10 years?
No, it was more the curiosity. Like, I think it was, that, like I wanted to see him face plant like hard, like
he could
strip
himself naked and cut a infant open in front of the crowd, and it wouldn't be surprising to about half the country, and they would still be okay with it. Who cares at this point? I thought
neurodegeneratively he was further along than it appeared in the State of the Union. That's all I'm saying. I kind of wanted to remember how Biden just like,
But he's been like, he could be Weekend at Bernie's, and he would still have the same amount of support.
It's
like,
true.
It could be people propping him a corpse up there.
It's true.
And he would have the same amount of support. There's nothing like I like Prof G, but he's completely wrong about that, what he's saying. Like how many headlines have you read over the years that said something like, this is the end of Donald Trump? Oh, he's really done it this time.
Right. Like he's different from, like Joe Biden could be, could have a lack of empathy and say, we're doing great. My policies are working so well. And everyone else is like, actually prices are really high and I'm losing money, my buying power. So like that's supposedly, oh, wow, that's something no one should ever do, is to ignore people's pain and act like everything's great.
To tell you feel different than you feel.
But this guy,
he gets away with it.
No rules apply. Zero rules apply. Because as I said, like when I was knocking on doors for this canvassing,
it's just the only rules that apply are cult rules. He's a cult figure, and any rule that you might any behavior you might see in a cult is what you can predict and expect in this case.
I think I mentioned when I went canvassing before the election to the union houses, and I drove down like one of the poorest neighborhoods in Tucson. Yeah, it's like up by the river. The road is not paved. There's huge potholes, and then everyone lives kind of in broken down trailers with no windows and cardboard taped over them and stuff. And I got to this house that I was meant to knock on, and this guy, his trailer like has holes in the bottom, and there's like animals running in and out. And there was a 20-foot wide by 16 high banner with Trump on it. And I'm like, hey, this guy probably send him money. Like when he emails him, he's probably like, oh, I've got $200 this month. And
like half his salary goes to either his evangelical megachurch that he loves, or and Trump. Those things.
It's impressive. He takes out credit cards to give to Trump.
It's impressive and it's depressing.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people have been systematically groomed over the years into this sort of religion of the Democrats are evil, socialism is evil, and the Republicans are for me, right? Like and they can't, and it's frustrating because if you actually have a conversation, I saw a fascinating chart that somebody made from a Pew study of like people's politics, right? And they, like we sort of oversimplify U.S. politics into like red, blue, and purple, right? Like there's a small group of independents in the middle, and there's this sort of like fiction that the story that, the both parties are fighting for this purple group in the middle, right? And there was a Pew study, I don't remember when it was done, not too long ago, but it basically divided it surveyed people's political beliefs, and it basically created like, I think 10 categories of people across based on what their beliefs are. And they had like flag waving conservatives on one, flag waving conservatives. They had like progressive, different flavors of progressives and stuff. The interesting thing was like all of the Democrats and progressives, like when they survey their political views, they're all they all cluster pretty close, right? And then there's like small government conservatives, blah, blah, blah. There's a handful of different conservative ideologies that cluster pretty close together. The one crazy outlier, and we've talked about this, but it was interesting to see it charted, is MAGA Republicans. Because the two axes on this graph were like economic ideology. And it was like all the way from like progressive to like conservative economically. And then the other one was like, what do you consider yourself, Republican or Democrat, or like conservative or liberal, right? Like, how do you consider yourself, conservative or liberal? And then what is your actual belief in terms of economic beliefs, right? So all the Republicans who consider themselves conservative, most of those clustered in conservative economic. The MAGA was way up in progressive economics.
Wow.
Like, it's way on the extreme of we consider ourselves conservative. Yeah. It's more extreme on that vector than any other Republican group. Wow. Like how they identify themselves.
Yeah.
But their actual economic ideas and beliefs and the policies they support economically are way up with the progressives.
Interesting.
Which is super interesting.
Yeah. No. It makes
and we've talked about that kind of like, it seems like there's common ground, and it's like, and the thing that gets in the way is this ideology, like this self-identification.
Right.
It's like a weird identity politics of a certain kind where you identify as a conservative because you hate Democrats or whatever. Meanwhile, like most of your economic beliefs are in line with them.
I think a fascinating sort of statistic in terms of the shift is, for instance, Arizona has always been 38% Republican registered.
Yeah.
42% independents, and then 20, whatever the remainder is, of Democrats. And so it's whoever can get the independents to swing over based on whatever topic is hot, right?
That's the idea.
That's how you get elected in Arizona.
Yeah.
And that independent number is growing with the youth vote as youth register. Increasingly, over 50% of them are picking to be independent, and I understand why.
Yeah,
because they don't see themselves represented by the Republicans or the
Democrats, or
and like Gaza was a huge thing. I mean, Gaza was like, hey, oh my gosh, absolutely. And so I think it's going to be really interesting because if we get to a point, like I think the
Gaza and the issue of taxing the rich, those are like the two issues that like the corporate Democrats cannot let go of Israel and like not tax, you know what I mean? Like they're really refuse to tax wealthy people and refuse to kind of loosen their Israeli support even a little bit, right? So it's and those are deal breakers for much of the base.
And I think that we obviously we're seeing, like Mamdani in New York is a test case. People, all these
Graham Plattner is killing it in Maine right now.
And
Tallarico's doing really well in Texas.
I think Tallarico cannot stop saying oligarchs are it's like they're the 1% that are causing all your pain. Oligarchs.
That's Graham Plattner's message too. Like he says, fight oligarchy. Like all his campaign rallies, that's the sign, right? Like,
So I think, it'll be fun to see. I'm going to do a weird little big picture kind of take, because listening to you talk about the MAGAs and having this like determined sort of where we are in terms of, it was very North Korean last night. Like dear leader, the applause was like, it just was a little bit too dear leader. And I go back to, I'm standing 30 years ago on the top of
they're ride or die at this point, right? And it's going to be die, I hope.
Yeah.
I don't mean like literal die,
but
like
political death.
But their party is they're like driving off a cliff.
Yeah,
it feels
so hard. They're just going. They're all in. Like I use the analogy of when you're playing hearts.
Yeah.
If you try to shoot the moon and take all the hearts, they're shooting the moon, and they're just doubling, tripling, quadrupling down. Okay, so here's my take is, so I'm standing on the top of Monte Alban in the middle of the city of Oaxaca, in the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. And, this was pre-Cortez, Christopher Columbus. This was a civilization that had, they built their own ball court at the top and this huge pyramid system. They had they had sewage. They had like crazy amounts of just really high infrastructure for a Stone Age, kind of Iron Age group. And then the historian that was our docent, our guide, said, "Hey, does anyone know what brought the theocracy down?" Because it was run by priests who would sacrifice, virgin daughters on the thing and take out their hearts, and and like in exchange for rain and fertile soil and no floods, And he said, there was a 70-year drought. That's actually, you can, in Lake Tahoe, there's evidence of these really tall trees at the bottom of the lake that obviously grew up during the drought and then got flooded again and died. And they're down there. It was like a 70-year growing cycle all the way from, California down through the isthmus. And he said, you can imagine as the drought continued, since the theocracy was built upon the priests controlling the weather by talking to God, by offering these things, that the priests, I'm sure, doubled and tripled down. We need more virgins. And then the family started to be like, it's just not working. Like,
it seems like it's not working.
It seems like it's not working. And that sort of doubt started to creep in. Who knows how ugly it got before they went after the priests. But eventually they did, and the civilization fell. But you can imagine that as it slowly, like how did it get up there? For 1,500 years of this stupid theocracy that makes no sense, right? But everyone bought into it. Everyone bought into it.
Well, I think, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I think that there's a huge number of us who are not Trump supporters, right? Who just can't see it. Like, we can't put ourselves in those shoes. And I think that is the source of, over the years, there have been countless pieces of like trying to get in the mind of a Trump voter. Like, what do Trump voters think about this, right? Like, and a lot of it, like, if you sort of like, the tone of a lot of those pieces, the sort of the subtext is like, when will this fever break? Yeah. You know what I mean? These people seem to have caught some weird disease. Yeah. And I don't get it. Like, I don't have the disease that they have. Right. So I want to interview them some more. Right. And figure out like, how does it work? Are there signs that the disease is passing? Right. Like, it's a fever. It's treated like a fever. Yeah, and I sort of see it that way. Like, I sort of internally process it that way, and I know that's probably offensive to people who are really into Trump. The fact, and they notice that. I think that they're offended by the fact that other people sort of see them that way, right? And that makes them further double down. But I don't know.
So I had to so I get my pharmacy.
So it's like the fever of sacrificing virgins, right? It's like the people who were still supporting that. And other people were starting to doubt it and be like, there were probably people who doubted it all along, going like,
it seems like
such a stupid idea. Why are those people giving their daughters to that guy? Like, this is, no.
It does, doesn't it? To me, there's very much like Shirley Jackson, the lottery, that sort of everyone standing around.
But we've, like, the tone of a lot of the dissent and opposition and resistance over the years, like the sort of the moderate middle of like the New York Times pieces, all that, a lot of the tone of it is like, what is this? What are those people? What is the thing what is the brainworm that they got? Right.
Right.
Like
because
the Kennedy brainworm.
Because when you hear about social scientists looking at, for instance, the Rust Belt and manufacturing fleeing to other globalized countries, our globalized supply chain, and you sort of these empty places where West Virginia, where there's opioids run rampant, and you see that this populist man came in and for some reason had the juice that these people could get the fever. Yeah. But it's so hard.
But usually what happens is those guys like, you can see where the reactionary energy came from in that population, right? They had legitimate grievances.
Yeah.
And what usually happens is they get disillusioned with the party in power and they choose the populist, whatever. And then that doesn't really work. And then it kind of, you know what I mean? But this time they really grabbed onto that one guy.
Yeah, it's true. And there's something, it's fascinating. It would be interesting to, as you say, to like, what, I often think like, okay, here's an example. Yeah. Remember back when my kids were in elementary school, gas went up as high as I can remember. It was like $6 a gallon in Tucson. So it was probably like $10 a gallon in California. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying to the girls, because I would drive them to school and it was like 3 miles or something there and back. And I said to them, wow, it's going to be really interesting. Like I keep getting in the car and I keep filling it up and I keep driving you. Mm-hmm. What would the number be where we just get on the bikes?
Yeah.
Like we just are like, it's going to take 45 minutes to get there, but we're not going to pay $29 a gallon to drive the car. And I often ask that, like, for some of the fevered Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And you've said like he could slice a baby in half naked on this thing and they would still be like bowing to him. Mm-hmm. But there's got to be people who are just
it peels off at the edges. You hear about people that, I mean, every day on TikTok or whatever, I'll see somebody that's like, I was a 3-time Trump voter and I finally seeing, and it's enlightening to some degree to hear them talk because they do tell you things you already know about how impermeable their information bubble is to information that doesn't support their priors, right? Like they have an immune system psychologically and culturally to anything that sort of like interrupts their beliefs, right? So that challenges their beliefs. So, I mean, it's self-perpetuating in that sense. And so you can kind of, you can see the sort of the mechanism, the mechanics of how it works for sure, psychologically and culturally.
Yeah.
And he does lose support at the edges. And so, but it's, I find it to be like, it answers the question for me in a way, like I get it. It's still so unsatisfying and frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Because there's part of me that's like, there may be no, especially in the age of AI coming, there may be no more important capacity of humans than the ability to know what's true, to know the truth. And when you don't know something, to be willing to just be comfortable with uncertainty, right? Mm-hmm. I sort of feel like that is maybe the most important human quality today in the world, and compassion kind of comes from that, or they work together. Like you can't have compassion without that sort of capacity to know what's true, to be willing to be uncertain about things, to have humility, like intellectual humility, right? Mm. And the MAGA crowd to me is the opposite. It's all about certainty, right? Like it's Dunning-Kruger. Like the more you know about something, the more you're willing to embrace uncertainty,
right? Because
the more you learn, the more educated you are, the more you understand what you don't know. So it's just like, I don't know, it offends my deep sensibilities when I'm confronted by people who are so wrong and so certain.
Right. And that's why I think a speaker like James Tallarico, who has like a Texas accent and a story, and his parents were there before it was even America, it was Mexico. Yeah. And when he says, because these words like trans, and all of a sudden, boom, I could never vote for a Democrat. They're pro-trans. It's like, I remember there was a guy who, the head of the Division I for NCAA, and they said, how many trans athletes are actually asking to participate cross-gender? And he's like, two or three.
Yeah, it was a tiny number. I thought it was more like 15, but it was something really small. Yeah.
Maybe it was 2, but it's like under 1%. Yeah. It's in that below 1%.
Minuscule.
Not a whole number.
Out of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, out of thousands. And so someone like Tallarico would be like, this trans issue is below 1%. This is below. He goes, the 1% that's really causing you problems. You're looking at the wrong 1%.
Yeah.
This is the wrong percent. They're up here. These oligarchs.
Yeah.
And it's great that because it does seem a little point and grunt. Like my old coworker who's a marketer said it's got to be like point and grunt marketing. Like like that. That how you think, because that's sort of how we are. That's where we are. Like you can't use statistics and science and like to your point, like when someone just has heard on Fox News, like, and that's why like that slogan, that $1 billion slogan,
it's like Trump they're playing an entirely different game. Like, and you recognize that when you try to have a conversation and you're trying to use like reason and evidence and stuff. And then at some point it dawns on you that you're faced with somebody who's playing a different game. Their game is about winning the conversation, dominating the conversation. It's about, it has nothing to do with evidence. They would never be convinced by evidence, right? Like, that's not their game they're playing at all.
So one of the things, and this is relative to this MAGA conversation. So I have lived in Tucson for 31 years, 31 and a half years, and I've never been to the rodeo.
Okay.
So some friends invited us to go to the rodeo on Sunday. And I was like, first of all, my wife said, "Where's the rodeo?" And I said, "It's out at the Pima County Fairgrounds." So we put it into the Google Maps and we drove 22 minutes out to the east to the Pima County Fairgrounds. And we got there and it was empty. And I went, "Oh shoot, maybe it's not at the fairgrounds." And I looked it up and it was like 2-3 minutes from our house. Like it's like just it's been right there, like in this weird time. Just south of us in this weird part of town near Irvington. Yeah. So anyway, we go to the rodeo, we walk in and it's literally my Colombian mother-in-law's there. And I'm like, this is, I haven't really been to like, except maybe like the Kempton or the Kutztown Fair. I went to like the Kutztown County Fair with Thaddeus once or something. And there was like, but I haven't been to something where it's like a true celebration of campesino, like farm life.
Yeah.
Everything about it is about farms, like cows, sheep, horses, boots, cowboy hats, blue jeans. And one of the weirdest moments was at the beginning when the announcer started praying. Like he was like, "Okay, let's all say a prayer." Like, "Oh God, dear God, thank you, Father, for this." And he just did this like 15-minute prayer, like talking about this shit. And I said to my wife, I said, "You know what's actually absolutely fascinating to me, and I hope that it continues. The founding fathers, one of the reasons that they said we need separation of church and state is they looked at the history of genocide and torture and that had been perpetuated by various forms of Christianity in Europe. And they said, we don't want the Spanish Inquisition or like the killing of, the transubstantiation, wars to come to our shores. Like we just don't, we see how problematic it is.
I mean, on the British Isles, there were Protestants and Catholics, right? Like,
just
like,
so
like it wasn't even, I don't think for them, it was even about, like the Enlightenment came out of basically trying to bring peace to that conflict. It wasn't even about Muslims or any of the other crusades or killing anybody else. It was literally about like the internal Christian on Christian violence that was happening.
So my thought was, this is kind of amazing because I can't tell if this dude is evangelical, Lutheran, Baptist. He's just talking about God and my father. And, and I was like, it's kind of amazing that we never fell into that kind of sectarian violence where Baptists and evangelicals are trying to blow each other's churches up. Yeah. Which has happened in Europe, right? Like it did happen. And I hope it continues, but it feels in some weird way like it, and James Tallarico is a seminarian. And so you think like interesting that he's able to be, I'm a Democrat and I'm also Christian.
I think that too, like when you look at, the deconstruction movement, right? Like people that are coming out of Christianity, that are leaving the evangelical church. One of the common themes of those people is that they follow Jesus right out of the church. You know what I mean? Like,
You
it's
mean,
it's what would Jesus, remember the bracelets? What would Jesus do?
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's a
Who would Jesus
generation of
bomb?
people who wore those bracelets. And, I mean, not to, and I think there's something to the idea that, the people who wore those bracelets were conditioned to ask that question. And when you're in a church that is more interested in power than compassion, and you start to ask, like, what would Jesus do, on a larger level, you're faced with this idea that, like, they wouldn't do what my church is doing.
Right.
Right. And so I think a lot of people who've left the evangelical church during the Trump era, it was for them about, like, a lot of them are still religious and trying to find a new home. And a lot of that was about, like, what would Jesus do? Like, my parents taught me to that Jesus was, the person I should admire and most. And, like, there's a lot of those deconstructed Christians that are like, my parents who are really deep MAGA, they think I am this heretic now, but I feel like I'm the one who's following Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing what my parents taught me to do, and they're mad at me for it. You know what I mean? It's kind of interesting.
I mean, like, historically, like, big picture, I often think how Christianity might be one of the most successfully disseminated brands that was also the most misunderstood. Like, how could the Spanish Inquisition and all of the killings that happened because of Christianity, how could that, like, Jesus never was like, yeah, you gotta kill the Catholics because, I'm a Baptist. Like, he just, it's just so fascinating. There was a really funny meme. It's not that funny, actually, but it was a funny meme that was a MAGA meme, and it had a picture of Jesus with an AR-15. Yeah. And it said, hey, if Jesus had an AR-15, things would have gone a lot differently with the Pharisees. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I've seen versions of that. Yeah, it's funny. I was telling my friend last night who I was out with, and when we were talking about, high school and stuff, one other thing we were talking about was religion. Like, we have mutual friends who are really very Catholic. One person who's close to both our lives that, puts a little pressure on us sometimes to be, like, my wife's sister is very churchy Catholic, right? Like, really deeply devout. And, I'm pretty sure, I'm more than sure that she sort of sees me as this bad influence on her sister. Like, my wife doesn't go to church as often and things like that. Right. And, we've had conversations over the years where it's clear that she wishes I was more religious, right? And I was thinking about, like, I was telling my friend that some years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses came to my door here in San Francisco, and they rang my doorbell. I thought it was a package. I went down. I'm trapped in this conversation now with these two Jehovah's Witnesses, right? And they're kind of asking me about my faith, and I'm like, well, I'm not really a believer. And then, one of them says something like, well, don't you want to know the truth? Right? And I said, well, if you're talking about God, like knowing the truth about God and who God is and what God is or whatever. Yep. And he kind of nods his head. I said, the way I think about it is, like, there are a lot of churches in the world, and they're all built by human beings who are trying to understand God or like present some picture of what God is. But I said, I think if God exists, God is such a big, it would be like us trying to understand God is like ants trying to understand humans. Like, we are less than ants when it comes to whatever God might be. So the idea that you could tell me the truth about God is just something I can't accept at all. I can't accept the premise of that whole idea. Like, I'm an ant. Whatever you might tell me, you're just an ant brain trying to tell me about what you think God might be, right? To my ant brain. And I said, so, like, I just consider it like it can only be a mystery to us humans. Like, we could only see maybe a tiny, like, you could see a tiny sliver of whatever God might be, and I could. and it can only ever remain a mystery. And ultimately, I'm pretty comfortable with it just being a mystery. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they didn't know what to they pretty much just left at that point.
Yeah, it is one of those things that
I hope I converted them out of the church with that.
right. No, it's one of those things where, you know, I'll admit that when I grew up, my parents sent me to a public school.
Yeah.
And I was drawn to go back to the private school in Bernathen, the church school, partly because I really was interested in religion. You know, like I was interested in.
But I think our church taught us, like the way I just presented that, I think would be embraced by our church. Like our church wasn't aggressive about like what you believe. It was very much focused on how you live, I think.
No,
I mean, there was this idea that there are these truths, but I think the idea that we can't really know, that we're limited, our capacity to understand all this stuff is limited because we are mortal, and whatever is divine is sort of beyond our grasp, and we can only understand it a little bit anyway. I think that was kind of built into the way we were taught, our church. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I do think, like, for instance, there's a lot of those sort of dual, I remember, love the Lord and love thy neighbor. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. Mm-hmm. So these sort of like two simple things, you know?
Yeah, like what do you need? What do you need? What can religion really provide that isn't already baked into the golden rule?
Right. That's a good point.
You know what I mean? That's kind of the other thing, is I feel like what is your church doing in people's lives that the golden rule can't already sort of cover?
Yeah, because
like from a sort of a dogma standpoint. I mean, there's the reality of community and gathering, and just like the physical manifestation of the church can be really positive, and it can but like in terms of the teachings, like what could your church possibly teach that isn't already covered by the golden rule?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Doesn't it all come back to that?
It's
do unto others, right?
As you would have them and do unto you. One of the things that caught me up when I was in high school and college in our hometown was that they would say it comes down to a life of faith and charity. Yeah, charity was obvious to me, like being kind to others. It's easy. It's easy. It comes naturally to me. Yeah. The faith part I thought was really odd, because I feel like to just want to believe in God and then to just sort of make that leap of faith, literally,
like
where
you can't make yourself believe something you don't believe, right?
Yeah.
Like you can pretend.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding when they said faith, but it seems like faith. They would also say faith alone is problematic. Like you have to have charity, right? But I could never really.
No, the faith. That's exactly what I'm saying. The faith part is something I could never. Yeah, I could never manage, and there was a part of me, like in church. One of the reasons why I ultimately left the church is because you do these rituals in church where you're professing beliefs in things, in prayers and stuff, right? Through prayers, and you're saying stuff out loud through your mouth. And there were parts of me that was just like, I don't believe the words I'm being asked to say here. Like, not that I reject them. It's just like, I'm not certain about them. So like, I don't like saying things I don't feel like that are coming from me, right? Like I'm still thinking about this, so I don't really want to say it because I'm not certain enough to really make this claim out loud or whatever, right? So like it was uncomfortable. I had a discomfort in just sort of like practicing faith that I didn't feel. And so the faith thing, and there's Pascal's wager, right? You know what Pascal's wager is, right? Like it's
remind me, because I've heard
the idea that you should just like in case there is a God, when you get to heaven, like, and he finds out you weren't a believer, like you're going to be sent to hell. So like, what's the cost? You might as well just believe, right? Yeah. Well, the flaw in that is you can't just believe. Like you can fake it.
Right.
So like you can't believe something you don't believe, right? Like you can pretend to believe something. So like, I don't know how you fulfill Pascal's wager as a human, right? Like, is the idea that you fake it and you go up to meet God, and God like can't tell that you were faking it? I mean, you can't, because you're trusting that like, well, I pretended to believe my whole life. I did the belief things, right?
Yeah.
Like, but if you don't believe, like belief happens in your heart. It's not a thing that you do. Right?
Yeah.
Like can you make yourself believe something? I don't think so.
I think so. My journey, which was to go like as a young, like a, junior in high school, to transfer back and take religion classes. And I think the place where, when you're in college and you're kind of questioning everything, and the place where I sort of fell off the default, I was raised a Swedenborgian and really became not one.
Yeah.
Was there was a Swedenborgian book, Divine Love and Wisdom.
Yeah.
Which basically it says we're a Christian. Under the hood, we're non-dualist.
Yeah.
Like everything is just God is electrons.
Right.
Like God is matter and electrons.
You, me, and everything are all just one thing.
Everything is just God. That's all it is. And then there's this sort of like veneer, like a shell, a car, like if you lift the hood, it's non-dualist. You close it, and it's like, oh, we believe in Jesus, but it's symbolic. Like it's everything is So I started being like, wait a second.
Right.
I don't think
you start to recognize. I had a similar thing. You start to recognize that all the trappings we put on top of that are things that we made up.
Yeah. Yep, it's true. And
then it feels arbitrary. Like, why do we make these things up and not different things?
Well, like you can hear Karl Marx whisper, well, it's the opium of the people. And you think like, if you go back to my analogy about the Oaxaca Monte Alban, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And there's this one layer that's about uncertainty, like you were saying. Every human is super uncomfortable not knowing if they're going to get food, not knowing if they'll be safe, not knowing what's going to happen after they die.
Right.
So to take this template of religion and just sort of slowly lower it over that to kind of calm that uncertainty, it seems like that's what all religions are really there to do. It seems like we did that as a species. We were like, oh, we don't like being uncertain, so put something on that explains it, and now we can relax. And to me, it just feels like, that's... Yeah. Once you kind of look out under that big cloth, that big heavy blanket, you're like, this is just bullshit. Like there's no,
Right.
I'm mad at Bill Mayer.
It's bullshit. And it was so obviously just invented by people. Like, why? And then you start to go, well, like my people invented this one that I go, this set of teachings that I'm being taught. But like, if I go 2 blocks over there, there's a different church. And they have slightly different way of thinking about a lot of this stuff. And so like, like theirs was invented by some different people than mine. And like, what's ultimately the difference? Like they both tried their best to figure out some shit and they were both different. So like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then you go like, none of it makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense for me to just, it's like being like, I'm all about McDonald's. Like Burger King is stupid.
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah, or Coke and Pepsi. Like
it's like having a really religious attachment to McDonald's instead of Burger King, or Coke instead of Pepsi. Like, like it seems like fine to prefer one because I like these people in this community and we seem to get along. Like that's a good reason. Like I like the taste of Pepsi, but the idea that like Coke is sacrilegious is kind of weird, right?
It reminds me of there's this archaeologist who was studying along the coast of Angola, like these sort of earliest Homo sapiens leaping over the what are they called? Neanderthals.
Yeah.
Like how come they failed and we survived? Yeah. And his theory he came up with was simply that it came down to 2 simple things: hyper collaboration and projectile weaponry. And I often say, like, if you extrapolate into the future and you say, what are the dark sides of those things? Yeah. Xenophobia, racism, genocide. Hyper collaboration, meaning we're the right ones and you're the wrong ones. And then the other would be the Second Amendment, distorting the Second Amendment to be like, I can take a gun anywhere I want. Like, like AR-15s are amazing, and God would have liked one if if they'd been around. And so I feel like in some ways, if you look at it through that lens, the the hyper collaboration is sort of what has been like built into our species to be like, I'm Coke, not Pepsi. You know what I mean? That's sort of,
there's a book called something like The Dark Side of Empathy or something like that, or Against Empathy. And that's basically the thesis of the book. It's sort of like, if you take empathy too far, it becomes tribalism, basically.
Right.
Kind of what you're saying, yeah.
And then the dark side of tribalism is, you're wrong, we're right, we're better, you're worse, and it ends up in this sort of nasty dark spiral.
Yeah.
But it's funny that because religion, one thing it has not done successfully is reduce per capita violence.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just like even the Shias and the Sunnis.
That was another thing that was built into my sort of ultimately leaving faith, is just like the churches commit, like the hypocrisy is built into the institution, right? Like the churches do bad things in the name of God, and so how do you sort of like process that or assimilate that into your belief? It's like, well, this church is being bad, so I can't be part of it, right? Like it's, or even, it's just like, or even when it's not being bad, like, I go to Catholic services sometimes with Lonnie and with my wife and family, and, there's a part of this church service that is called the Prayers of the Faithful in the Catholic Mass. And I like that part. It's basically kind of connecting prayers to the world. It's like, there's usually go through a litany of, well, we pray for our world leaders that they have compassion and then wisdom and blah, 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 things like that, right? But some of it is like very specific, like praying for people to get, for a war to end or something like that, right? Like, I guess there's a part of me too that when I hear those kind of prayers, I'm like, you guys have prayed for this stuff for generations and God hasn't fixed it. Like the God you're praying to doesn't give a shit about fixing the thing you're asking him to fix, right? Like
it's true, yeah.
So either he doesn't give a shit, or he can't fix it, or he doesn't exist, or it needs to be a problem and praying doesn't make a difference. Like he's decided there's some bigger plan where this thing you're praying goes away, this suffering that you want to see end is continuing regardless of your prayers for one of those reasons. Either God doesn't exist, or he can't fix it, or he doesn't want to fix it, or he thinks it should be the way it is for some other larger reason, right? That's the mystery of faith thing.
Right.
But regardless, your prayers are dumb and pointless. Like if God exists and he thinks that suffering should end, he'll end it. And so, like, what's the point of praying at all? Like, that was the other thing. It makes no sense to me that you pray to God to you ask him to do things. Like, he's either going to do it or he's not, or he doesn't exist.
Right.
Like, your prayer makes no difference. The idea of believing your prayer makes a difference is one of those things that I started to find almost like it offended me.
I've stolen from this Shakespeare sonnet and stuffed it into like titles of my paintings and songs. Yeah. Traveling deaf heaven with your bootless cries.
Yeah.
Like just kind of hey.
That's exactly it.
Like, traveling deaf. That's pretty avant-garde for Shakespeare to say.
Isn't that Hamlet?
No, it's in the sonnet.
Isn't that the to be or not to be speech?
I think it's in the sonnet, the one about how much I love you. I think we could look it up.
Count the ways or whatever.
Let me count the ways. I think it's that one, but I could totally be wrong. Yeah.
No, I think you're right.
But I think what's so interesting is like that was a radical thing to say. He's basically saying it's stupid to pray. Like heaven is deaf.
Yeah.
And you're just like knocking on this empty place that doesn't exist. And with your
like
bootless
even
cries.
In the best case scenario where there is a loving God, right? The suffering has gone on this planet in our human existence.
Yeah.
And so, the best explanation that churches give for that is the mystery of faith thing, right? Like we don't know what God wants.
Right.
Right. So we just have to trust God that the suffering is happening for a reason, that there's a larger plan, right?
Yeah.
And so even in that best case explanation, your prayers make no difference. Your prayers are pointless.
Yeah.
Because God has that larger plan. So it's just shut the fuck up. Why are you asking God to do anything, because even in our most sort of charitable, best case, reason why that suffering is happening is because God wants that suffering to happen for some larger reason. So the prayers are stupid, I guess, is what I'm saying. And it bothers me that people think otherwise.
Right.
Okay. Just the caveat is people should just recognize prayers are for themselves to feel better. That's it.
It's
just a ritual you do because it makes you feel a certain way. And that's fine. But just acknowledge that. Don't pretend that you're somehow convincing God to do something.
I had a friend who I knew through the yoga community years ago, and he was really interested in philosophy as well. And he had two thoughts: one about climate change, and the other was about, let's say, like you're walking on the street and this obviously very down and out guy is asking for money, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, just so we can be perfectly clear, if you give him $1 or don't, you're doing it to make yourself feel a certain way. Like, right?
Yeah.
You're not, because it's not going to affect him. It's really not going to affect him at all.
Yeah.
In the long term, someone else will give him $1.
That's an old philosophical debate, right? Like, to what extent is altruism a selfish act versus a selfless act? Is there such a thing as a selfless act? I guess is an old philosophical question. Yeah.
And then this one that he had, because he was part of a group that was trying to greenwash their clothing business. So he would go to these environmental conferences and meet with the scientists and the engineers that were trying to solve climate change and global warming. And he came back from one of the conferences and he goes, when we say like, oh, I feel so bad for the planet.
Yeah.
We're actually saying, I feel so bad for our experience as a species living on the planet,
because be fun. Yeah.
The planet came from molten rock cooling,
right,
and created this vast diversity. And he said it's like Mother Earth will just flick us off her shoulder and won't even notice.
But even that doesn't have to be, isn't necessarily selfish, because you can feel like, you know what, I'm a prosperous, wealthy person. I'm going to be fine.
Oh, absolutely, yeah,
right. And so, like, I look at, for example, I was thinking about this question actually recently about like the people of Minneapolis who are putting their bodies like literally on the line, right? To protect their neighbors. They're doing things at personal risk and personal cost. They're donating lots of food and money and rent relief and setting up communication networks and transportation, clothing, all these things, right? A lot of that whole, thousands of people are involved in that effort for no personal gain, right? And it probably does make them feel good personally to be doing that. It gives them some purpose, meaning, whatever. But it is also risky and costly, and it's not really for themselves, right? Like, both those things can be true at the same time. You can be doing something that makes you feel good. So there is a selfish component to it, but that's not like, that's to say it's just that would be silly, right? Obviously.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because if you go down that road of like, it's only for you, it becomes a nihilistic dead end.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think there are people that live like that.
Yeah.
And I think that the far right that are in power right now, and they have this fundamental core belief that we are all selfish, which is why they hate the idea of democracy and populism and taxes and the welfare state. And they fight so hard against all of that because I think they deep down feel like there is no such thing as the collective good. Like, it is all about me, and everybody is like that. They sort of, their core belief is that everybody is like that. Yeah. And that if you are not a fundamentally selfish person, then there's sort of something defective about you, or else you're just deluding yourself, right? That's what they believe. But I think that like what's happening in Minneapolis just proves them 100% wrong. And so they're implementing this program that's built on the premise of that we're all selfish people. And it will just hit a brick wall at some point, because we're not.
Right.
They are. A small percentage of people are.
Yeah. That's true.
But most people are not. Like, and so there's a reason why they fetishize IQ, because they think, we are the apex species because of our intelligence. But as you just mentioned, like, we're not the apex species because of our intelligence. It's because we form bonds with each other in community, and we can collaborate and cooperate across time and space, right?
Right.
That's the thing that makes us the apex species. And that's about being connected. It's not about being intelligent.
Right. You know what? When we were saying about climate change, like, there are billions of people around the world who depend on ocean fisheries.
Mm-hmm.
If the collapse of coral reefs because of the high CO2 acidity of the ocean collapse the fisheries, they'll go hungry.
Yeah.
There are billions of people around the world, especially in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific, who are very vulnerable to ocean to rise, and to and
sea
to
level rise. Yeah.
Sea level rise, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, just because I happen to live inland, like at 2,300 feet, and I'm never going to have a problem with the ocean flooding my house,
right?
I should not think
to
about
which
other
that
people.
it causes you actual pain on some compassion level, to know that those people are facing an existential threat. Yeah,
right. They will go first, and that's really, I think, the root cause of a lot of our border crisis and the application of refugees from places like in Guatemala that no longer someone cannot have a sustainable agricultural existence.
Right.
So they just, where do we go? And so that's why. And I've heard this really interesting people, social scientists pointing out that people have migrated since the beginning of humanity. Like we've migrated to where, and we just ended up in this place where now we have borders. And
it's interesting. I mean, and you look at, there was a book I read maybe a year ago. It was about the early North American kind of settlements with the Five Nations, the Haudenosaunee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the nations that were adjacent to them, like the Seneca, that weren't part of the Five Nations, but were effectively part of the Five Nations. And the English settlers there and the Quakers and stuff in Philadelphia and whatnot, and for, a couple centuries, they were the minority, and they had to kind of operate the way the natives wanted them to, because the natives were powerful, right? Yeah. It's like, we're guests on your land.
Yeah,
right?
They're guests on your land, yeah.
And this book was about, I think I may have mentioned it before, but it was about a murder trial. So like a hunter or a trapper killed a native guy, a fairly prominent, somewhat powerful, like sub-chief guy got murdered by some trapper in a drunken kind of dispute.
Okay.
And so the Quakers, to kind of keep the peace, they put the murderer on trial, and while he was awaiting trial, they had him in jail, right, in Philadelphia. And this book kind of follows this whole series of events, and how it was this pivotal moment, an inflection point in the relationship between the Europeans and the natives. And it happened around a time where the balance of power was starting to shift. Like, there were more and more settlers, so like they were becoming more powerful. But the natives were really offended by the idea that you would put this murderer, even though he murdered one of their people, that you would put him in jail. Like, jail was not a thing that made sense to them. And it kind of was in the same category. They were starting to have borders between like Maryland and Pennsylvania, and starting to have these different kinds of rules about crossing borders, and where the tribes were supposed to be and stuff. And the tribes are really pushing back against confinement and anything that limited freedom of movement. Like, freedom of movement was like the most important freedom, basically. Yeah. And so the idea that you would put somebody in jail was just insane and just nonsensical to them. The idea of a border was nonsensical to them.
Do you know what their legal system how they would have treated the murderer?
So it was really interesting. So their whole thing was about reconciliation and repayment, basically. So like in their culture, if let's say one person murdered somebody from another family, right? Like, the tribe would have the equivalent of a trial for that murderer. Mm-hmm. And they would decide between the the families and some third party kind of judgy, like counsel would basically say, all right, you murdered the brother of, the eldest son of that family. Now they don't have an eldest son. So your job for the rest of your life is to try to make it up to them. And you're going to do it this way and this way and this way. And so it was all about, like, if it was property, that was like, okay, you're going to repay them somehow. If it was a person's life, it was like, well, what was that person in their life? It was their eldest son, and he did this and that. So you're going to do those things that their eldest son did for the rest of your life. You are effectively theirs.
Interesting. Yeah.
In their service or whatever.
Yeah.
So like it would be that kind of punishment. It was, and that makes a lot more sense, right? It's like, you're not just taking this person out of society, you're making them pay back their wrong in some fashion directly to the victims.
Wow.
Anyway, so it's kind of cool.
I wonder if it was especially effective because the tribe was so tight-knit as a social group that if the person didn't comply, they would sort of be shunned, and it was almost a death sentence to be shunned from such a tight social group. I don't know. Yeah,
and there's probably, like, we're just born into different cultures where we internalize, like, I think it was a writer named Mark Fisher said, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism, right? Like, we're born into a certain system, and so there's a level to which you don't even question it. It just feels like the water that you're swimming in. So it probably was maybe partly that too. Like I just pay those people back. That's just how it works. Like,
right.
You don't even get to the point where you're thinking about, like, what if I didn't comply? Because it's just part of your reality. Yeah.
There's a beautiful sermon or talk by Jonathan Rose, who's a amazing translator and a minister in the Bernathen Church.
Yeah.
And he talks about the eye for an eye, and he reads it out of the Hebrew. And he says, we often think, if you poke my eye, I get to poke your eye.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's actually what the true, like, the ancient statement says in Hebrew is, it can never be more than an eye for an eye. And the implication is that you will, if this person can't see, you'll go help them harvest their crops.
We talked about this before. It's basically the same idea. Yeah,
same idea, right? And because that you've taken away that
right,
that
you are
power
going
from
to
that
be
person.
their eye now.
Exactly,
that you took away.
Because you took away their eyes, and you need to go fill in that gap.
And it's interesting, like, back on the subject of, like, movement and borders and stuff. Like, this is something I wrote about recently. Just where the sort of the current far right came from in this sort of anti-immigrant thing. In some ways that ties back to, or in a lot of ways it ties back to the split that happened between conservatives. There was this sort of libertarians that had this sort of, the core libertarian belief was like, there shouldn't be government, right? Government should be minimal. We should all be, private property is everything. And in that sort of principled libertarianism was this idea that, well, life should be basically meritocratic and egalitarian. Like, anybody can succeed. Like, if the state just got out of the way, we can all, we can see who rises to the top. And then there was a split where it was like a group of these conservatives was like, all right, but if we actually operate that way, then what we're saying is, like, all these brown and yellow people and black people from other places could just freely move here to America, and we can't have that. And we can't have these black people rising out of the ghetto, right? Like, there was a group of conservatives that were like threatened, like, we need to protect our libertarian utopia from all these, incursion by all these other groups. Mm-hmm. And one of them had the quote, like, there's a reason why Japan has factories in the Philippines instead of having Filipinos in Japan, right? Like, it was a very intentional, and they wrote tons of, they wrote countless books and papers about, like, the reason why immigrants, we need tighter borders, and we need to expel immigrants and all that. I mean, we're seeing the manifestation of that right now, but there's 4 decades of papers and writings and books that all kind of rationalize all of that whole xenophobic thing. It's not just this weird accident that we are implementing that policy now. Like it's a far right ideology that was, extensively rationalized through books and papers.
Do you remember the Know Nothing Party in the early 1800s? They were like a flash in the pan, but their only platform was the Pope is trying to overrun and grab control of America by sending Irish immigrants to breed, Catholic Irish immigrants to breed. Yeah. And that was their whole platform. Yeah. It was like 1823, 1835, I don't know. And so it's been around. I mean, we definitely had this very strange
for sure.
xenophobia for a long time. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, awesome conversation, man. I think we're at time.
Yeah.
Good. Always great to talk to you. And I get to go next Monday. I get to go meet my grandson in San Diego. So I'm going to be there.
Abu.
I might do the show from there, depending on where my ticket is. Yeah.
Cool, brother.
All right. Great to see
care,
you.
Man.
Yep. Happy. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.